Choose for us a range of different topics which will look at, for example, questions about insertion of data into the CRM database without necessarily using the standard upload techniques. So we'll be looking at the use of writing batch uploads. We'll also be looking at some of the things that we have to consider now that we're working with version 5.7 rather than with version 5.6 and earlier versions. That will probably take the main part of our discussion, with then a discussion over some other topics like the new search select advanced field that has been added within version 5.7. I'd also like to look at the customization of the lists, because there's nice features on the ability to add in HTML and custom content within field blocks, but also list blocks. And also to be able to add in heads to control the logic as to whether a particular column, green column, should display or not. A topic that you might seem surprised by deciding to include on this is RunBlock, which those of you who may have been on any of my folding courses will have probably detected a certain amount of reticence about discussing. This is because RunBlock itself has quite a lot of limitations. But what I decided to do based on some of the discussions that I've been having in Europe on the rise of the hosted solution is to look at what we could possibly do in terms of minimal amount of coding or zero coding, new streams and new lists being added into the system. So that's the basic agenda that I want to run through. Now, from the skeleton for this particular session, what I've also prepared is a sort of case study, and that case study I've zipped up is a component, so I'll be installing that component and talking through exactly what I've done, how we've done it. And the idea behind this is that a particular customer has a requirement to be able to suck in legacy supplier information from an existing database, and that simply gives me an excuse to talk about the structure of the company and person tables, which are probably the most complex entity inside the CRM system. But it will also hint as to how you could approach the concept of importing product information or other information, perhaps legacy opportunities, into and as part of that, we'll add in additional fields which I'll want to display in a particular way. Relationships, which are related to a self-referencing relationship to allow companies to be related to companies in a very, very simple way. I'm certainly not pretending that it would be a necessarily way in which you would approach the actual data model in the real world. All of the case study is simply here as an example of how to do things, and you can adapt these hopefully in your own imagination to your own business requirements. So the first thing that I should start off with is a discussion of the change, a very serious change that took place between version 5.6 and version 5.7. As you may be aware, the solo system has completely been remodeled. Now this isn't a session that is going to touch on solo. Suffice it to say that within the old replication model, we needed to make use of identity columns, and other databases didn't. And so what's happened is very much a change to standardize the approach to controlling the unique identifiers within tables. So if you're using an identity column inside SQL Server, then just simply inserting the record into that table would generate the next number in the sequence. But where we're using a system where those generated within the system itself. It has an implication in the way we may have carried out insert previously in an earlier version of the application. And consequently, we're going to have to check to make sure that we've not put any code that doesn't insert directly into the database in the validation rules, in the table level scripts, maybe inside your own triggers and stored procedures that you've written, and any ASP pages using the query objects. Now, I'm going to be talking about the technical problem that occurs, but there are other things that we will need to mention, and I'll discuss that in a moment. The most obvious way in which records would be written into a version 5.6 system is two ways: the record object mechanism, using the create record, and the query object mechanism. Here you can see that I might have using the create query object with an insert into the cases table. So we notice that we've got insert into cases, and it's just doing a direct insert without any worry about the generation of unique identifier. The effect there is that it would throw an error, and CRM would greatly protest if you just took version 5.6 code using version 5.7. All the way through, you have used that, you will have to rewrite to use the idea of the create record. Now, I'm a great fan of the create record mechanism and the record block. It takes away for us a lot of the worries about making sure that we are correctly time-stamping items and marking things as entered and controlled correctly. The mechanism behind the create record is actually to call a stored procedure, or a couple of stored procedures, which reference tables inside the CRM metadata that will allow the next sequence for each table to be obtained. The logic behind this is that the code that you can write is the whole application is much more portable through to the database, because we're not relying on the custom mechanism of the database. I think somebody could number one, please.
Why can't she use magnetic media? Number two, she doesn't want to use magnetic media. That's all. Thank you.
Which is where that code is likely to occur, are in validation rules. Certainly when I used to write rules that if I wanted to insert or cascade a change based on data, it was very much a poor man's level script. And so validation rules and table level scripts are both places where those inserts using the query object could be found. Check your ASP code, and you may well find that as you are migrating. So you just need to do searches for that across any of your implementations. Now, note about the trigger. I've implied that the record object is implicitly using a couple of stored procedures. Now, I'm not going to mention those here because I want to try and encourage people to use instead the record object, and that's the mechanism that I'll be demonstrating, and frankly, that's what I think that people should be using. And we've got to do now is that we're going to what will be available to you, and if it's not already available on the partner site, I'm going to make sure that Bill will distribute to all the attendees these resources which I've listed here. So there's a new document which describes the role of identity management in version 5.7. As part of that, there's a document that discusses actually the changes to the data itself. And there's a new video diagram as well. I'm not entirely sure whether it's a version 2002 or 2003 version of Visio. You'll need to check that out. And I know that the data model is available on the resource site already. Okay. Now going back to this particular slide, which is talking about other places where SQL is written, is just really to watch out for unforeseen locations where inserts may be occurring. Now the slide that I've managed to produce and bring here is one that I just realised is demonstrating an update, but the principle will rest the same. What we're seeing here is the screen from a workflow insert and SQL action behavior, and we can see that it can be writing any data manipulation language, including an insert. And if you're doing that, you have the same problems of using the working with the identity column. So the whole question is essential to identify the areas of code that you will need to change in the record object approach. Okay. Well, I'm stepping over to look at this particular data diagram. The reason for looking at this particular diagram, now I'm not entirely sure whether this how this resolves. Bill, I wonder if you can tell me how well that appears on your screen.
I have it enlarged fully, so not terribly visible, but we understand.
Well, you can identify the tables that are mentioned in this subsection of the data model.
Yeah, the tables basically clear. Field name, we have to fund.
Okay, that's fine. Essentially, I'm not interested in the field names. It's to demonstrate the point that really when you're dealing with entities like the company entity, and we think about the process of carrying out the data upload. Data upload, if you're doing it through the interface, will invite you to insert into the company, insert into the lead. The lead is a very simple entity, essentially just consisting of a single table. The company entity is a different kettle of fish. We are dealing with an entity that contains links to from the person to the default, from the company to the default person, any additional people that might be being inserted, and we also have to consider the way in which the company and person are linked. So there's actually a person link table, which allows you to record the different roles that the person contains within the company. We have the same issue of the address, where addresses are linked to both the company and to the person via an address link, and the email is linked and may be linked to both the company and to the person as well, and the same goes for the telephone numbers. So we have the possibility of thinking we're just entering in one record, because that's what it looks like in the Excel spreadsheet, but in fact what we end up doing is writing in maybe a dozen separate records scattered across 6 different tables. The case study that I want to look at is actually the importation of data from the Northwind database. But as I said earlier, that really for the suppliers table, which we're going to connect to and suck data across from, it really could be, it stands for anything, and so the principles in the code that we'll discuss is good for any of those particular coding locations. Right, well, let's see if I can share out my CRM and we can go about doing this. Let's get to share out an application. And hopefully, Bill, can you confirm that you can see the log-on screen to the situation of the photograph in the CRM version 5.7?
Yes, we can.
5.7. 5.7. If I say 5.5, that was a bit of a Freudian slip. Obviously, I was thinking back to the good old days, or even the good old bad days. I don't know. Version 5.7a on my screen. I received an email yesterday saying that it should be a 5.7b coming out very shortly on the Resource Centre site, and I've been reminded to make sure that people keep a lookout for that, so that there is a Service Pack B coming out at some point. Okay, now I'm going to log on. Now you notice that it gives you the same warning message. Has anyone noticed the fact that CRM is faster? Well, that's a rhetorical question. I'm not expecting answers from metered lines. It is faster, and the way it's made faster is the fact that we're no longer pre-caching absolutely everything into memory, and we're bringing things into the cache on demand. So as the user moves around the system looking at different screens, so the different translations and screen definitions are loaded from the pointer into the web server cache. Consequently, you don't get into huge weight as you are entering CRM for the first time. I personally reckon it's gone from something like a 30-second wait with a default system to something like a 6 seconds. So a factor of 5 in the speed of initial logon, and probably something like a 50% improvement of general screen draw. Okay, now the areas that I want to go to is I've come on as the administrator for version 1 in version 5.7. You can see that I'm using an application instance called 5.7. I'm going to come across into administration and go to customization, where I'm going to import a component. Now, I'll have to ask you to take my word for it. Well, I don't have to. I can actually prove it. But if I look at the company information before I go back into administration, we can see that we're lacking any information at the top part of the screen regarding supplier information. There aren't any special tabs regarding supplier information. And if I was to find the suppliers inside the system, if I look at companies of type supplier, then we would find that there are only 3 in the demo data. So, the purpose of what I want to do is to be able to come into administration, eventually have a nice button in data management which allows me to import the data from the Northwind database. To do this, I'm going to go into my customization component manager, where I have prepared myself a component. So I can see that there's a component here called the import Northwind suppliers example. The purpose of using this component, and I'll walk through this, is to demonstrate a number of different points about the component as well. I'm a believer in the component manager, and those of you who have started to use the component manager will identify that there are certain weaknesses with it. It doesn't necessarily record absolutely everything with certain blocks. There are certain areas that do that, but as a means of delivering, as an install shield, it's a very easy way of working with CRM. And let's have a look at this. So I'm going to go through and install a component, and you can see that instead of the normal collection of parameters that you might expect, I've actually used this to declare out some warnings about the installation. So essentially I've got a check, and this could provide you with a mechanism to, if you're distributing components to your customers, a way of confirming that they agree that the component that you're delivering, that they accept the responsibility for that component if they decide that. And that's if you're distributing the components to another business partner as well. So I'm going to go ahead and install that particular component.
And one of the things that I've also demonstrated here is that as a component manager, you can communicate with the user as it's installed. So I certainly express my wish that this particular component will have been successful in its implementation.
Yes. We're scrolling back and forth, so if you can make sure to go back to the left side of the screen when you're asking to click save or find.
Is that right? Is it the wrong resolution?
Yeah, it looks like it's a little large. You want to
What I can do is I can just dip down to my desktop and I will change my resolution down a smidgen. And what I can hope is that a little bit better in terms of how it looks to you.
I think we're still losing the right portion of the screen. We can see 90% of it. It's just when you go to hit the right side button.
Right, okay, so I'll make sure that I do return back. I'll stick to the left-hand side mostly now. Okay, so we've run this component. And what I'm going to do now is to see some of the changes that it's carried out, and then I will go through the discussion of the code that actually sits behind it. So first of all, I've got, if I go to a company, I've added in a couple of tabs. These two tabs are actually using RunBlock, and so we'll be looking at how RunBlock has been used, and we'll also see that we've got the idea of we've got here for the RunBlock, this particular block, the use of some extra HTML to establish buttons that we might want to use. The big change is in the fact that if I come into administration and I go into data management, is that I've now got a button that invites me to import my suppliers. Now this import supply functionality is making use of an ASP page, and we can see that ASP page sat here. And it functions perfectly well, but we currently have an ASP page graphing the three suppliers in the system. If I now import, we'll see that the number of suppliers has increased. That's a dynamic connection through to the Northern database, retrieving the data from the suppliers database. Okay, now how have I gone about doing this? Well, there are a number of different stages or a number of different points that really we would need to consider. The first would be the screens that I've added in. The second would be the ASP pages that I've added in, and the third would be how I bundle that up into a component. So if we use that as the particular running order of what I've done, we'll be able to understand this. So let's go now into customization, where we can start to see the areas that I've customized as far as screens are concerned. Now if we think about the pattern of customization, I've really been customizing the company because I've added in new fields into the system. And this is something that has been automatically brought across by our component. We can see these four new fields: the supplier approval date, the parent company ID, the supplier status, and the supplier type. So one particular field we see here is a search select advanced. now I can look at this particular field and we can start examining its particular nature. Now this is a new field in version 5.7, and it was something of an excitement to me to see it, because it really does revolutionise the web picker. Now the web picker is probably a good point to demonstrate web picker is inside something like the opportunity table. So although we're going to be looking at this company supplier field and relating it back into the company table, excuse me, the starting point to see the possibilities is just to simply remind ourselves the effect of if I was entering in a brand new opportunity. So if I create a brand new opportunity, we can see here a new web picker, and it's detected that the last context that we were in was inside GateCom. Now, if I change and lose context deliberately and come back into the new opportunity, all the screens inside CRM now have this web picker screen exposed. So it is something that we can access when we're customizing our screens, and the fields for the web picker are also exposed. We can see the effect of it in that we've got our company that we can enter in. So if that was GateCom, it's got a nice drop-down effect, and then the ability to bind one field with another field. I don't need to go ahead and save that and demonstrate the particular points. I'm sure that if you've gone through the What's New guide, you'll have seen the web picker. What you won't possibly have actually picked out so dramatically is that those fields on the opportunity table are nice examples of how what previously the foreign key related field used to be unavailable in version 5.6. So we have access now here to the company and to the person, and we can see the written search select advanced. Now if I examine the properties of this, what we can see is that our search select advanced shows us that we're linked to a particular current entity, searching in the context of the current, that's the idea of if we're wanting to bind out and search for anything, that we want to use the current opportunities reference point, we're able to identify that the company name, type and status form the basis of the drop-down as we saw. Those are the fields as displayed. And the concept of the restricted field, well, it's better seen if we now drop through into the person field. So if I come out of that and have a look at the person field, and we can see that this field shows us the person with the phone number that is bound to the data that is inside the company. So what we're saying is that once we have chosen the company and we look at the person comes from the company, and that's done dynamically. So that's a nice improvement on the old web picker, especially since in the web picker screens are shown and exposed to us here, where we can see the opportunity web picker. And so if we were to do any if we were to create a new entity using the advanced customization wizard, and we wanted to add that into the web picker to the opportunity as well, for example, if that opportunity was related to a project or an event, then we would be able to move a new advanced search select related to that entity up into the web picker here. And you just need to be aware of where all these web pickers are found. So it's not just under the opportunity, but it would be underneath the cases, underneath the communications as well. And what you're looking at for is a consistent naming of web picker. You might notice that there's a web picker screen here with the rather strange OE, and that's simply the web picker screen for the order entry area. And so you can see that these web pickers also have the nice facility to put in some additional scripting, which cause if somebody changes the company, then we force the change. And this gives you a hint from a development point of view, in that wherever the web ticker screens are used, there must be some sort of embedded JavaScript. Now, this is a little bit out of scope now of the presentation I wanted to go on, but it starts to open up some thought processes for you in thinking that some of the system-built screens have some internal or pre-built functions that you may want to explore by looking at view source. Right, now, that explains the background of the particular type of field that I added into my company. And I just want to improve the particular behaviour of that field for the suppliers. If I come back into the field and look at the advanced search select for the supplier parent. Now this is where I want to try and build the idea that suppliers exist in consortia or groups, and that you might well have a subsidiary for the supplying, each supplying as a different component or a different service into our company or our particular contacts that we've identified. And the search SQL I'm going to use, because if I look at all companies, I'll be getting a large amount of data, so I don't want to further throttle the information by just reminding this particular lookup that it should just be looking at supplier information. And I've managed to put an @ symbol instead of a quote. And let's have a look at the company name, its status, and perhaps its website as well. And that will have an immediate effect that if I then return to the recent list and have a look at a company, let's go and find a company called Flyaway. So I have a look at Flyaway Airways, and we can see that the supplier info now is shown to us. I can change this, so this must be a block that is appearing on the company table, which it is. So I'm just going to put in the approval date. I'm able to look down through all of the existing data. I can say that Office Supplies is the parent for this, and then I can look at the type. I'll choose safe. So they're all related together. I can go to Office Supplies, and I can now have a look at the subsidiaries and see that Flyaway is very clearly shown there. Right. So we've looked at how a particular new column, such as the advanced search select, can be added into the screen. We've seen its power in the web ticker areas. The next point I want to go to is looking at how these screens are built using the rather straightforward rough block functionality. It's all defined underneath administration. And those of you who have probably worked with CRM and probably tried to use RunBlock with a variety of different success. I've built a new screen. Let's go in here. I've built a new screen called Supplier Box. Now this Supplier Box is just based on the company screen and on the company table, and I've added in the necessary information that we can see here. So the information I've tapped through has got all the information that we might want. Alright, and I can you can see that I've also got a piece of script in this screen which has managed to find its way into the wrong location there. Next, I'll take that out. So this is the screen, and that screen, that simple block, has been referenced inside tabs underneath the supplier info. So we're using the action run block, and that supplier box I've further wrapped inside another block, but we are calling it, and you'll notice that I've not got any SQL in place. So you can certainly mark the tab as sensitive. What you'll find that you can't do, for example, if I wanted to insist that this particular block only showed up if the company was a off-type supplier. If I would normally, on most blocks, I would be able to say comp type equals, and then in here, supplier. Let's see. Right, update this, and choose save. I'm now going to have a look at my company. I can go to my supplier info. Then you can see I get a very nasty, horrible message. This is one of the reasons why RunBlock has some limitations. As long as you're aware that it's not going to be defensible by a straightforward screen block, is not going to be defensible by an SQL statement, a predicate there, because it's been passed into the behavior of the block, and it's a special thing that RunBlock works like. Then it's okay. It's quite useful to be able to add screens that would normally be cluttering the whole presentation. So I like the idea that I can use RunBlock to allow me to space out screens which are getting too crowded. Let's update that to save. Now the next type of block that I defined was a list block. If we have a look at the list block, you can see that I've built for myself a supplier subsidiary list. And in here, what I've done is I've added in the custom content that I wanted, and we could demonstrate the fact that we could put in some JavaScript if we wanted to. So I could reference to see whether I was the account manager and whether or not, therefore, I should see the revenue particular field. But this is creating, this is a new feature inside version 5.7, the ability to put in create script. And so here what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sort of check out to see whether the company, let's think EWARE context info for company. That particular company, primary person ID is going to be equal to the current user. So I'm going to check to see whether that's if I'm looking at the account manager or not. So current user dot user underscore user ID. Because if I'm not, then what I'll do is I'll say visible is false. Quite unusual in that inside our version 5.7, although we've added now the create script into the list blocks, the property is the same as the property inside an entry group, an entry block, the fields, where it used to be hidden. And so you'd say hidden equals equals true or hidden equals false. Here, for some reason, the developer has turned that around and made it visible. So we've got visible true or visible false. So I'm just going to check there the idea of getting the context information to see whether the somebody primary person ID is the same as the logged on person. And actually, if it's not, let's take that off. If it's not the same, then I want it to be invisible. So I'll update that particular field. And in the custom content, what you can do is you can see that we've added in quite a lot of HTML that will produce the required help button for this particular screen. So let's save that. If I go back to my main menu, when I look at the subsidiary list, you can see that I've actually managed to hide the revenue for that particular group because I'm not the account manager. And we've also got the help button that if I click on the help button, that help button springs up, and that demonstrates how you can add buttons into this block cert or even JavaScript to make reference to features inside CRM. Okay. Now I'm conscious that time is flying by, so really the next thing that we have to look at is the ASP code that I've written, and for this I need to share out another application. So I'm just going to look at another application, which I'll start up now. I wonder if, Bill, you can confirm whether or not you can see as yet. Can you see TextPad yet?
We're back to the PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, yeah, well, I've managed to do that well, haven't I? Let's go back into this listing. Can I get this to appear? No, for some reason it's not wanting to.
Share your desktop instead of application and make it the forefront.
Well, let's see if we can do that then. Nope, I've got the application now, so here we go. We're looking at the application, and I'm going to pull in a particular file. Now, this is the file that is responsible for the. There are essentially two files that are responsible. If I also need to share out the CRM, so hopefully you can see CRM now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. Well, essentially there are two files involved in the upload. I've included one underneath data management, which allows me to list out and form the basis of this graph that shows me the number of suppliers and then a list block underneath. And so we should have a look at the structure of that. And then we should also have a look at the structure of the import file and seeing the considerations that I've made there. So to do that, over I come into TextPad, which is my preferred text editor. I'm just going to go in and open up. It's actually the wrong one, but it allows me to get to the two pages that are involved here. Now these files, the reason why I've been able to add the particular file underneath the admin area is that another change in version 5.7 is that most of the admin menus have now been opened up, and you need to go into administration, advanced customization, system menus, and you'll see there the different system administration menus that you can alter, including the data management one, which I've altered. And so the first starting point is this suppliers list. Now, I don't think that there's anything too unusual about what I've produced here. If you're familiar with the sort of the fairly standard way in which ASP page is going to be structured. Now, Bill, I think I would like to reduce the font on this particular screen so you can see a little bit more text on that. Is that likely to cause upset if I just change the font size?
I don't think it comes down from Windows.
I'm just going to apply down to today. Is that a little bit better? Can you see that still okay? You can see that okay? Alright. Well, what I'm looking at here, what I've done in this particular page is that I've combined the use of a chart block with a standard grid list. And what I wanted to do is try and show how easy it is to have two blocks which don't have direct communication, nevertheless can be assembled together and handled in a particular page. Now, one of the typical things that very often people are quite frightened about doing is adding blocks together, especially where one of them is a list, because they know the behavior of the list is to be able to go on to the next page, the next page, the next page. And so if I swing back into here and I go into the next page, you can see that it is actually working quite happily, this particular page that we're working with. And consequently, the reason that it does that is that the behavior, so long as there aren't more than one competing block at the same time, so long as there aren't two lists, then the blocks are able to coexist because the mechanism of action is similar. So you would be able to put for example, a screen block containing the header of a file and then a series of details displayed in the list block underneath. So, for example, if you had a supplier with contracts underneath, if you wanted to put supplier details and a list of the different contracts that they might be associated with, that would be acceptable as well. Okay, so I'm looking at this and we can see that we've got, first of all, a chart block generated. Now, I could have done this by defining the block in metadata and then referring to it, but this is just encouraging you to get the idea of defining your blocks inside the actual code and using some of the definitions and showing how the SQL can be built up. This, of course, could be built up dynamically. I've put in a fairly hard-coded piece of code, but I could have looked at the environment and built my chart accordingly. So I'm also obtaining the suppliers list, and we're also dynamically adding in, so I'm using the existing company grid, but I'm also now using a delete time to get rid of the website, but also adding in another site. So I've taken an existing metadata defined block, now I'm just changing it dynamically inside the code. That's lines between 47 and 54. This is showing how buttons can be added into the screen. I think this is something that people should be familiar with. However, I've done here is that we can see that I've made a request to run the import with a particular button, metadata refresh, and a reference to the import supplier. So it's a good thing to realise that I've not made direct reference to the supplier's ASP page from a tab page necessarily, and that will have an important idea for us when we come on to looking at the movement of files inside components. Here I've had fourth and fifth parameter, and what the fourth and fifth parameter of the US button method does, and this is something that is very often overlooked, is that we allow us to link in buttons to the existing security mechanism. So I'm saying that I've got insert rights on companies in order to use that particular button method. The next behavior that we're doing is a custom help button, and it shows us a little bit more difficult to see, and this is where perhaps I maximise the screen, I'm going to have to scroll over to the right, I'm afraid. As I scroll over to the right, we can see that the third action is a rather long URL down to a particular file for display, but we notice that the fourth and fifth parameters aren't used, but now we have instead a sixth parameter being mentioned. And this is demonstrating that the button as well allows you to define a pop-up into a pop-up window. So that Beware Help could be another window name, and that sixth parameter of the button allows you to spawn out to a new window a particular action that you've included in your custom pages. The main page, though, is assembled by using a container, and this, if you've not already experimented with CRM, is that you'll find that really your pages should only ever contain one block that is returned using the block-to-web mechanism. If you want to have several blocks like the chart, like the list, in the same page, then what you should do is include them in a wrapping container. And the container could be defined in metadata, but is more typically defined on the fly by dynamic instantiation within the code. And we can see that we've got the container defined on line 64, and we're using the add block method to add the previously defined blocks into the page. Because we're dealing with a custom page on our own, we don't necessarily want the change button displaying on the container, so I've just suppressed it there as the default button and added in our own custom buttons, which would call the import and call the help. Now, at one point that if you are assembling multiple blocks into a single page, is that communication between blocks can be quite interesting. If you're using the snippets pages that I use and you pick up on the training courses, that you will probably know that you can use the arg object to pass data from one block to another block, from the screen block to a list block if you want to build a parameter, if you want to build a search screen. The point that I'd like to identify here is that we're dealing with a container, and the argument being passed to the execute method of a container is actually applied equally to all of the contained items. So this could be one technique that allows you to break up the screen into multiple elements. So, for example, you might want to rebuild the company summary screen by including multiple screen blocks, but you could group all the screen blocks into the one container and then pass the record block into the argument string. So it would be passed to all of the different items. Okay. Right. Now I'm going to stop looking at this particular page and switch now across into the actual business page that did the import. And this is probably the most detailed page that we've got. I tried to document it all the way through, and I was doing these sort of quite short notice in order to make sure that we had something to hand you afterwards. And so what I've got here is a walkthrough and talk-through example of what we're doing. Now in the page, I'm going to be reading the suppliers table. So what I'm hoping, well, this is really essential, that has been successfully achieved when we installed the component, that underneath the advanced customization area, the consultant went through and established the connection to the Northwind database and built the suppliers table. So back in administration and customization, there should be a metadata definition of that suppliers table. And so if I look at the secondary entities, we'll see that clearly written down here. So we do have a suppliers table. Now that we know that we've got a connection, then we can write the ASP page to interrogate it. The suppliers table is a single table, so essentially reading from the analogy of a spreadsheet, where one row is going to get broken up and written into a number of different tables and rows. And if I ask you to cast your mind back into the presentation, you'll know that there is an island, an archipelago of 6 tables that need to be written to an island group. The first thing that we've got to do is actually start opening up the cursor object to the suppliers table and see we find record and we've established our record object. Now previously you may well have seen only the use of passing in a unique identifier to achieve to find a single record, but this is where you don't, or where you phrase a different parameter, or you don't include a parameter, then you'll return and be able to handle all the rows of a particular table. So I've surrounded all my actions within a while loop, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to step through each of the rows inside the supplier table. And the starting point is to think about our company record. And so we're using the create record mechanism, and we are using environmental information to allow us, as soon as we have chosen create record, to go ahead and populate the parameters for this. Now the important point about what we've done here is to realize that when we create a record, it's a two-phase thing, that we can create a record and we can populate its parameters for each record, which correspond to the columns, but it won't be saved until we explicitly call save changes. And it's not until, therefore, that point when it has a unique identifier. So it's only when we've chosen the save changes. But most of what we've got here, you can probably identify and understand that what's happening. You can see the phone number and the fax number are being written in quite happily directly from the supplier table. So we're referencing the properties of the current row of the supplier record into the new record of the company. But look back up here where I've got the company name. When I started writing this, I was going to be clever, because I realised that SQL doesn't like single quotes and apostrophes inside its string, so you have to actually go through the explicit job of surrounding those by quotes. And so that's exactly what I've done. I started to build a regular expression that I would then rebuild the company name so that all apostrophes were correctly quoted. And you'll notice that I've commented out line 50 and 51 where that action has taken place. And this is because I learned in this exercise something that I wasn't expecting, which is that the record object will automatically handle apostrophes in strings and will correctly write them into the database. So this is another reason why I like the record object. It handles apostrophes without generating errors neatly. Now going down through the code that I've written down into, as we see, line 61, looking to read down, we've added in our company record, and so at this point, at line 59, we now have a unique identifier for the company record. This would allow us to, when we come to create our person record at line 63 and line 64, to link that person with the company that we're creating. So, if you imagine the data inside the database and you think about the usage of CRM, you know that a company that is added won't just have a person, they'll have a default person. So at some point, I'm going to need to know the unique identifier so that I can then write back in to the system. So I can write back actually into the, so I can go and write back the person ID into the default contact for the company. Now, line 67 and line 68, you can see I'm using a simple, it's not a very sophisticated option. Line 68 is to just simply identify where the space occurs, so I can split my single contact name field into two fields. This is the equivalent of the multiple field option inside the data import. It's not very sophisticated, but I think does the job. It splits the names out into the different fields. And we then save our person record. Now you'll notice that once I've done this, I'm able to come back and add the link from the person to the company. Now I have made a rather gross assumption here, and that is that I'm assuming that there's really only one person per company in the supplier, and that is the case. I looked through that, otherwise I'd have had to start to think of a mechanism for deduplication. I really didn't want to inflate my task any more than I had to. So we see that we're creating the person link, and just about every table that is inside the database can actually be referenced with a create record or even a find record like this. So we can know that we can go into person link and click on that and then be able to build the appropriate link. So I'm identifying the person ID and the company ID, and then I'm saving the changes. I'm then going back and creating, now that I've got both the company, the link, and the person built, I'm going back to edit the particular company. Now this starts to give you some thoughts, actually, or this is something that you may well have realised, especially if you've been on a development course, which is we are making direct reference using the record object. We are changing the company record. First of all, we do an insert. Now this is tying in, if I cause you to think across into the table level scripts. And our table level scripts have these four moments in them. You have the insert, post insert, update, and delete. Now delete is out of the loop here. We're not doing a delete. What we're doing is first of all an insert of the company record. So this would fire any table level script on that company table that was on the insert moment. As soon as we have committed the data, then that's when the post insert would fire. But we are then doing a further change when we write into the company table again, identifying the company primary person ID. Now notice I haven't issued immediately afterwards a save changes. But if I did do that, because there was already a company record held, that would have fired the update. If you think about the process, or if you've ever mapped and examined those, you will know that you can see very clearly during the process of entering a new company through the interface that there's an insert, a post insert, and an update that occurs, and the update is because of the writing back of the default person ID into the company record. We've got to do similar tasks now, other than similar to the adding of the person and of the person link, because what we've got to do is now create a new address. And what I've done here is I have added in simply the address information that I've got and saved changes to record those changes into the database. Now I found while I was working with the adding of the address to the person and to the company is that there has to be actually separate records for the person and for the company. So we've got now a link from the person to the company in the address link, but we also need to make it a company address and make it a link to the company. If I didn't add the material from line 111 through to line 117, then what would happen is that I would have only added an address at the level of the person. So it really rather appears that if you've added a person link, an address link to the person, then even if you've got the company ID there, it's really assuming that this is a person-specific address. But as you can see here, I wanted to make sure that we had a default address for the company as well. So that's why we've got the addressing direct business added in. Similar thing with the business telephone and the fax telephone number. There is only types of telephone numbers. There isn't in the phone number table. There are separate columns for the fax and phone. They're expressed as separate rows. So the more telephone numbers that you've got, the more rows that you actually have to write into the phone number table. And we can see that we've made sure that this is both for the person and for the company. I guess there is something that is missing, and that's simply because I didn't have any data for it, which is the email. But I should have added in email changes as well, which would have resulted in which would have resulted in some further entry of records. We're updating our company and personal records with the address and the phone data, so we're making sure that we've got the correct contact and phone address and so on. And then we are saving the personal record as the final item. So we have gone through, we saved all the records, and that allows us to loop through to the next supplier record. The other thing that I've done to comment here is that rather than declare the variables inside the loop, I've just done a rather little bit more efficient item, which is make sure all my variables have been declared outside of the loop. Okay, so that's the main business. You should be able to use that to essentially identify everything, or how you would go about the process of adding in data into any other complex entity inside CRM. So hopefully that page will be useful to you. The last thing that I've got on the sheet, which is, of course, I call this page through a button to carry out the import, and what I've got there is a redirect as soon as I have finished the task to redirect back into the original suppliers list, and that has the effect of simply when I go back into data management, if I have run the import, I will be returned to this screen. So we saw immediately the increase of the number of companies from 3 companies up to these 32 companies. Okay, so we're almost at the stage where I can say I've finished the things I wanted to talk about. Because the last thing now is to mention the component that I've built. For this, I'm going to just open up the 2 files that we might have. Looking at the ES file, the import suppliers file, and also the parameters file. Now, those of you, if you go to the developer's guide and you have a good look in the developer's guide, you'll see it's all described. Most of the examples, though, demonstrate really the use of parameters for entry of data. One of the things that I certainly found when I've inherited components from colleagues is that I've not known what the component does. So I was looking at the mechanism by which we can make sure that anything that we enter in is just echoed out. And this is the idea of read-only. So read-only allows us to demonstrate that we can put in text to communicate with the user. So if I go to my customization and look at Component Manager, now I'm not going to run this again, otherwise I would generate metadata issues, but I've created this as one that is possible to install multiply, and we can see that you can use it to create disclaimers, or you can use it to go through the normal sort of vein of action and write a component with the ETF files that allow you to grab hold of any parameters you like. So, for example, the advanced customization wizard is a very strong example of a complex component. And I'll let do that exploring to look at the component file, the ECF, advanced customization with an ECF file. Now, inside my ES file, I started off by generating out and reading out my component file, much in the same way that I would, as you probably expect. So if I look at a component file in the changed here, I open this particular file up. That's what it was. It said it was a script file generated by CRM version whatever on this date. This looked fantastic. And then I started to try and play it back onto different installs, and it found that there were a number of different problems. Certainly, if you start adding in data about a particular database, then it's difficult. You can't actually enter in things like the password to your database because it's encrypted, and CRM wants it to be encrypted. You can't pass it directly in, you can't write that in, especially if you're creating the link. And so you have to typically edit your ES files, and the example of our ES file here is one that was assembled from a number of different discrete tasks. And what I've got here is a version that is now demonstrating satisfactorily a number of different points. For example, we can see that we can instantiate ActiveX objects, COM objects, during the process of our running of a component. What this means is that we can create links dynamically to third-party software, or do any scripting that's allowed inside the normal JavaScript syntax. Interestingly, this is an idea that you might want to be aware that you can instantiate an ActiveX object, is that you cannot inside an ES script make direct reference to the EWare object. The EWare object is not in scope as you run this script. You can certainly run this script in such a way as if you needed to use a CRM object, an EWare object, you could do that. That's one of the blocks. And just this sort of little example that I've got here to demonstrate an external logon shows you that you can quite happily now carry out a logon into the product using ActiveX and using whatever password that you might want to use. And that's something that you could actually ask the user to provide. So you could force the user to log on in order to use EWare objects during the process of your script running.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I just want to let you know we got about 10 minutes.
Oh, well, I'm nearly finished.
Excellent.
Nearly finished. So we have the idea that we can instantiate ActiveX object, and we have the idea as well that we can instantiate calls to the CRM object using the mechanism to allow you to script from external applications inside CRM. You can see that it does some very limited checking, make sure that it's not anything other than a SQL Server application. I could have built in more error checking, but that's all I wanted to do. And we can see that we're using the registry and data in line 55 as we add the details of the custom databases. We have the different metadata that has been described, but on line 91, we'll see that I've done something quite interesting, which is just pointing out that here we can move files about. And this is typically necessary where you're wanting to deliver not, in the case of these JS files, but essentially any file that needs to be moved around. For example, if you've provided new artwork, new logos for new buttons, that is, new buttons, you're not replacing the logos of existing buttons, but you're adding in new functionality, and you've added new artwork, or you want to move a script file around, then this is the way in which you can do it. Copy ASP to drop into the custom pages, and you can actually specify whether you're dropping into a particular root directory or into a further subdirectory out of these custom pages as well. I've got the details here of how the metadata is done to add in the new screens and the list block through the run block call. And the last thing that I've got here is the add message. And this is the final point that I wanted to say, really. The component that we've written, you've now got I've shown you a component that is covering all those different points. So I'm just going to stop sharing now and drop back into the presentation to make sure that there are no other slides waiting for me to cover. Okay. So we've talked about our search threat, and we've talked about run block, and we've talked about the list implementations. Okay, I wonder, oh yes, let's make sure. So amongst the resources that I'm going to provide you with based on this conversation is that I'm going to send across the actual PowerPoint. So I know that some people have wanted the in PDF format, but actually I'll provide it to you in PowerPoint format, because some of the slides might be useful to you. The other documents are provided in PDF format or in a video diagram format, so you can take that as well. And that's about it. Is there anything else? I think I'm very well.